Delicious in Dungeon is a show that I honestly did not expect to love as much as I did, from its creative ability to balance compelling drama with comedy, to the skillful way in which it utilizes its absurd premise as a clever way of building its world. This is a show that is absolutely bleeding with personality from every angle, and it's also one of the best Trigger shows since Little Witch Academia. I just think Trigger should stick to fantasy at this point, because that's the only way they truly knock it out of the park. If you're not familiar with Delicious in Dungeon, the title is quite literal. In a sea of fantasy shows that reference video game tropes, Delicious in Dungeon asks the philosophical question, what if Dark Souls, but you can eat the enemies? It's almost shitposty how absurdly stupid that premise is, which is something the characters themselves are aware of, and yet it's able to make it work to an impressive degree. I could go on and on about how genius this premise actually is, but I think the show speaks for itself in that regard. Eating is one of the most important and down-to-earth aspects of life, and it's something our characters do a lot. So it's able to be charmingly simplistic, relatable, and utilizes this as a tool of building the world, establishing the dynamic of our heroes, and the way that their personalities bounce off of each other, and also serving as the foundation in which every plot thread surrounding it is built upon. It is easily the most important aspect of the entire show, and I don't think any character in this series conveys that more accurately than that of Laios. Laios is one of my favorite parts of this journey, and the biggest reason is because he's kind of symbolic of the show itself. He has a very simple worldview and is shamelessly confident while also being empathetic and approachable. He's very knowledgeable of the monsters that reside in this world and equally curious to see what they taste like, but it's also shown from the get-go precisely why this idea is so important to him. Already off the bat, his sister Fallon is eaten by a dragon. She sacrifices herself in order to guarantee the safety of her friends. So within minutes, we're already given some tension and urgency in our journey, only to end up focusing on how to cook dungeon monsters. I got tonal whiplash the first time I saw this, but it's kind of intentional. Part of why it works is that eating is a part of everyday life, and it's something our group of heroes has to do 3 times a day. But what's even more interesting than that is how resourceful they are with it, making the most out of their environment and almost kind of embracing it in a way. And save for Senshi, only Laios truly embodies this philosophy. It is partially an excuse for him to be obsessive about his fascination with monsters, but it's also a lot more important to his character than you might initially realize. One of Laios' biggest strengths is his quick-witted resourcefulness. One of the first things we even learn about him is that he's incredibly dedicated to Fallon, even willing to go completely alone if he has to. He's a man who cares deeply for the people he holds close, but more than that, he's someone who tries to make the most out of a tough situation. The fact that eating these monsters was his idea is only a small part of that. It really extends to just about everything he does. One of the episodes that I think firmly cemented him as my favorite character was the one in which he fought a moving suit of armor. Upon finding out that it's entirely controlled by these strange mollusk-like creatures, he decides that he wants to keep it. But what's most fascinating is that this turns out to be a very smart and very good decision that he made for a simplistic reason. He's obsessed with monsters, and he needs a new weapon, so he found something that appealed both of these aspects of his character, and this decision was only reinforced by its incredibly useful ability to detect nearby monsters. It's easy to look at Laios as just a complete idiot. For starters, he lies to his party about his weapon, telling them that it's not a monster, mostly out of fear that they would not support his decision, despite it still being very useful. It's clear that sometimes he doesn't give his friends the benefit of the doubt, or even often seems to be very inconsiderate of their time. A better example might be when he had the idea of jumping into a magic painting so he can try out the food and see if it'll fill him up, which doesn't work. However, I would argue that this actually emphasizes his quick thinking and resourcefulness more than people actually give it credit for. If you really think about it, it's a smart idea, even if it didn't end up working in the end. Honestly, they can't all be winners. He has a tendency to be a bit impulsive, and this sometimes leads to his downfall, like when he gets the stomach bug from eating raw meat. But he's not so much stupid as he is adventurous and creative. And the 2 moments that I think emphasize this the most are the fight with the Red Dragon and the episode where he jumps into Marsil's nightmare. By the time we finally do meet the Red Dragon, we're already halfway through the season and intimately familiar with the structure. It's a moment of hype, of euphoria, a point where all of our heroes must stand together and face the same opponent that defeated them beforehand, but the plan doesn't work. Hoping to use their cooking pot as a shield against the dragon's fire, it ends up burning Laios' hand, forcing the group to rely on Marsil's next strategy, which is to trap the beast using the environment, which also doesn't work. It's a tense moment where the heroes we've grown attached to begin to face serious danger, and it begins to resemble what had happened last time. But it's Laios' quick thinking that saves the day. Now with a clear mind, he realizes that the dragon's weak point is directly under its chin, and it only becomes a matter of angling himself correctly to hit it where it hurts. One of the most admirable aspects of Laios' character is his determination and bravery, as he ends up sacrificing his leg by diving into the dragon's mouth so he can angle himself backward and stab it in its weak spot. Even though he does get his leg back, what's most commendable about Laios is how willing he is to endure that kind of pain. He stops at nothing to save his sister, even if that means throwing himself into the mouth of a dragon. The episode in which they cut the dragon open to find Fallon's corpse was honestly one of the most dark and disturbing cliffhangers, but it also proves my point, that Laios is willing to bring her back with dark magic, going to the painstaking and honestly traumatizing, disgusting, and elaborate effort of meticulously piecing her entire skeleton back together in order to perform magic that is completely illegal. But this turns out to be a mistake as well, as the time they get to spend with her once she's revived is short-lived, because the ritual was performed within range of the dragon's body. Fallon and the dragon fuse together as one, and she goes on an absolute rampage. What was a hopeless situation becomes even more questionable. Was this the right decision to make? Should we have played God and brought her back from the dead? The only thing that motivated him up until this point was saving her. Not eating properly and going in unprepared was precisely what got her killed. Laios can't accept this mistake and chose to undergo whatever method would save her because of it, and for that very reason he can't stop his journey now. There has to be a way to get her back to normal, return her to the Fallon that they know and love, and separate her body from the dragon. No matter how many times he's told by others that his decision was foolish, he stands by it with great conviction. It's his dedication that makes him endearing. Laios knows his friends well, and does what he can to help them, even down to the fact that he's willing to learn magic despite being a close-ranged warrior. If it's something that can guarantee the safety of the people he cares about most, he's willing to accept it and make whatever sacrifices he deems necessary to protect them. It isn't just his sister that he dives headfirst into danger for, but his close friend Marcille as well. At a certain point, she's having a nightmare in which she's a young, vulnerable girl running away from a scary monster in a labyrinthian hallway. Laios does his best to try and save her, but every time the monster touches him, he ages forward. Marcille is probably affected most by what happened to his sister. She's absolutely terrified of outliving everyone that gets close to her. The people she cares about most always leave her behind, but it's Laios that reassures her that it'll be okay. That even when they're not around anymore, they'll still be there in spirit. And that's the best thing right now, is to continue looking for Fallon. But if you want a less dramatic example of why Laios is the fucking GOAT, the shapeshifting episode is my personal favorite. A group of shapeshifters transform into members of his entire crew, and it becomes hard for any of them to tell which one is real, since these people copy their personalities, memories, and so on from other members. Since Laios is underestimated as the stupid one, his clones become a little too obviously fake and end up getting locked up first. So it only becomes a matter of trying to identify the other. And what else would Laios have them do? Then cook, so he can watch and take notes. Despite being such an absurd and ridiculous premise, it totally fits this series, and Laios' character, because his intelligence and resourcefulness really shines through. Even though he seems completely stumped, he knows his friends well enough to pick them apart from the fakes, no matter how close in appearance they might be. He's a man who is actively curious, ridiculously dedicated, and he has a big heart that just cannot be matched.